And joining me now with more on what could come out of the NATO summit is Harlan Ullman. He's a military analyst and a senior advisor to leaders in business and government on national security. Thank you so much for being here. You know, NATO already announced plans to create a strike force that could respond to Russian aggression. What other actions could it take during this meeting, and how likely could it be that it would actually do something?
This is a great opportunity for NATO. As many people have said, this is probably the most important NATO summit since the end of the Cold War. But I think what you're going to see is probably more polemics and rhetoric than action. Mr. Putin is looking for an exit strategy in Ukraine. Even though it may not look like that at this moment, he has got some real problems, and I think he does not want to escalate. So I think the Ukrainian crisis over time will recede. But the situation in Iraq and Syria is deadly, and it's something that the alliance has to take on seriously. But the problem is that NATO is really an alliance that's defensive against a military threat, and the Islamic State is not yet really a military threat. And so what it really needs is leadership. And the most important thing that President Obama could do is to stand up and come up with a strategy and a plan and get the other 27 members of NATO to go along with it. That would be the greatest outcome from the summit, and I really doubt that's going to happen.
Well, who else, if not U.S. President Barack Obama, who else could come out of this or lead the group?
Nobody. This is the one chance for American leadership. And the difficulty with President Obama is that while his rhetoric and words are powerful, his actions are strong. Last week when he said we don't have a strategy yet for Syria, that just amplified all the concerns about drawing red lines, about telling President Assad that he has to stand down. And so all those things erode the credibility of the president. But he has to rally Prime Minister David Cameron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and French President Francois Hollande. And I think that that's possible. But the summit only lasts a day and a half. It's filled with great photo opportunities and terrific opportunities for politicians to make points. So I hope that this is not something that's going to be lost, but it is a very, very important time for us to take a stand against what is really a serious threat, not only to the West, but also to China, which has Islamic problems of its own.
I want to get back to that in just a moment. I want to go back to the issue with Ukraine. You know, the Ukrainian president was there. The Russian president was not. Neither are NATO member states. But what sort of message do you think that sends? And could there be any fallout because of what you see and what you don't see?
I think that Mr. Putin, as I said earlier, wants an exit strategy. He's assimilated Crimea. It's going to cost the Russians a huge amount of money. He may have told the president of the European Commission that he could be in Kiev in 2 weeks. There's no way he could be there in 2 weeks, and he couldn't stay because there would be a civil war, and the Russians would be as badly blooded there as they were in Chechnya. So that's just empty rhetoric. Putin realizes that he's gone about as far as he can, and so I think that there's going to be some kind of settlement. And for the alliance, which is now putting together a rapid action plan, it puts together the strike force that you talked about, is a counter to Russia. What happens after Ukraine dissipates, when there's no more threat, when the Russians go back and do what they're going to be doing? And that's the point that I think needs to be taken seriously. Ukraine cannot be the only centerpiece for this particular summit. The Islamic State, I think, is a larger threat over time than Russia ever will be.
Do you think all the member states, and you mentioned this before, that it's an opportunity for photo ops, but can these countries get on the same page as they look at how to deal with ISIS,
Sure,
as this is an ever-evolving problem?
It's really easy. And unfortunately, the easy part is writing what the plan should be. Execution is difficult. What you have to do is have a strategy that has lots of elements. It's got to have a political element, an economic, a financial element, an anti-propaganda element, counter-terrorist, and a military element. And what you do is to get NATO states that have a particular expertise to join in that particular level of the strategy. You also have to engage other countries. If we don't get the Arab League, the Gulf Cooperative Council, to include the Saudis and the Qataris and UAE, the Turks, who are obviously part of NATO, all these countries engaged, including Iran, we lose this chance really to use NATO as a center building block to rally other countries, and then countries can pick and choose. It's almost like a Chinese menu. You can take from column A, B, C, and D. But you need the basic building block, and that's what the Americans should be able to deliver Whether they will or not, we'll see after tomorrow.
Well, how do you see all this playing out with all the other crises and conflicts going on in the Middle East? And you now have AlQaeda coming out today and saying, we're going to spread, we're going to go to different regions, and seemingly in competition with ISIS, trying to even gain more attention than what we're seeing now.
This will sound rather bizarre to a lot of your viewers, but this gives the West a huge opportunity. The fact that there are so many crises, we have a chance to take them on if we have a central plan. But it has to be comprehensive, it's got to be coordinated. What's happening in the Pacific and Asia is related to what's happening in South Asia. Don't forget, look at Afghanistan. Afghanistan is close to civil war. What's happening in Pakistan? Riots in Islamabad, they want Nawaz Sharif to go. Then you move further west to the Middle East and to Libya. There's a chance here for the West to put together a very significant package to draw lots of people, including China, to join in. We have a crisis on the one hand, we have huge resources on the other hand, if we can mobilize them. So theoretically, there's a very, very good way out. The problem, as always, as Clausewitz, a great military philosopher, said, is execution. In war, the easiest of things become very, very difficult to do, and the challenge is execution.
Militarily?
No, politically. This is a political deal. You take IS on by political and economic means. You freeze their resources. They have banks. You cut off their financing. You have to have a counter-narrative to show how that version of Islam is equivalent to Nazism, that the IS, the Islamic State, rivals Nazi Germany in terms of evilness. These are things that we have to do. Then you mobilize the Iraqis and local states to provide ground forces. This is not a time that NATO has to put troops on the ground. What NATO provides are the building blocks here. And then you put together other capacities. It's a huge opportunity. It has to be well orchestrated. Whether we have the capability to do that or not is the test that NATO faces.
All right, Harlan Ullman, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time and insight.